What's up guys, Justin Morgan here, Carved Up Vegan Muscle, and this video is going to cover certain aspects of training volume and how we determine muscle growth. So the biggest effect that we see on muscle growth is the overall training volume, and typically training volume has always in the past been measured sets times reps times weight. So if you take say 3 sets times 100 pounds being the weight for sets of 10, then that will be 100 times 100 times 3. So you'll come out to 3,000 pounds. That is actually 30,000, not 3,000. My bad. Overall training volume. And that has typically been how in research that volume has been measured. But I came across a really good article back about a month or 6 weeks or so ago from Greg Nuckols, one of my favorite online bloggers that talks a lot about current training research. And what he was looking at, or what the article that he posted to his site was looking at, was the effect of training volume and looking at it in a different way. So the studies that have come out have always generally used that same formula, sets times reps times weight, in measuring volume, and we understood and knew that volume was the biggest determinant to muscle growth. But what several of the studies that have been done, namely some by Brad Schoenfeld and some of the bigger names in training and muscle growth research, is that there was some studies that kind of conflicted with that. So when people would work up to, like, say, one heavy set, or I'm sorry, one lighter set at a higher number of reps, they seemed to do not quite as well as athletes that worked up to more sets at lower weight, or at heavier weights, I'm sorry. So for lower reps, so say sets of like 1 to 5 or something like that. And what I think what this article and what the compilation of research is looking at it, and by the way, I will link the article in the comments or in the description box below. I would highly encourage you to read it if you are an athlete or anyone that has any interest or that uses or that needs muscle growth as part of their sport or as a competitive advantage in your sport. But what the article is insinuated is that the number of total sets that are done in a training session is a more accurate way to determine the role of volume instead of measuring sets times reps times weight. So we are using the weight aspect, and we are using we're just using total sets that did to a fatigue state. So in the article, they said something that went close to failure or failure. Now, that is not necessarily a method that I would encourage anyone to do, to go to failure on all of your sets. But what is relevant in this is that, if we're doing something like what I generally encourage people to do, go to, say, an RPE, rate of perceived exertion on a scale of 1 to 10, if we're going towards that 9 thing, that is something that is close to what your maximum capacity is. So if you could have done a set of, 300 pounds for a set of 6, but you only did it for a set of 5, and your goal was to do a set of 5 that day, then that would be kind of in that range of an RPE, rate of perceived exertion, of 9. And I think that is, when you're integrating this type of thinking, this type of training in terms of measuring volume, then this is probably what is the most ideal situation. You don't want to fatigue yourself to a state that is going to hinder your ability to train day after day after day. So what this study, is how it's relevant to us, though, to strength athletes and to anyone that involves muscle growth, whether you be a powerlifter, strongman, weightlifter, bodybuilder, is that when we start looking at rep ranges, traditionally rep ranges have always been thought of, well, if we're going to work directly on strength in lower rep ranges up to 5s. When we are looking at hypertrophy or muscle growth, we are looking at sets of 8 to 12, and when we are looking at primarily muscle growth, we're looking at sets of like 20. Muscular endurance, we're looking at sets of 20. However, this research is kind of throwing a lot of that out the window. What we're seeing is that people working in that rep ranges of 20 actually are getting good muscle growth. They actually see a stimulus for muscle. But what this research in particular is looking at, and it's a meta-analysis, a group of looking at multiple studies and combining the findings of those studies, is that they would need to look at the total number of sets done. So they do something that is to a RPE of 9, something that is fatigue. Now, RPE is very difficult to measure when you're talking about sets of 20. Even sets of 10 starts to become kind of difficult to gauge on the RPE scale. But so you're likely going to have to use some different method of determining volume in that instance if you're doing those rep ranges. But for those of us that are doing less than 10 reps, so 1 to 10, somewhere in that range, if you are generally just looking at the number of sets that you've done, then that is an excellent way to do that, or to look at the training volume, the training stimulus for muscle growth, rather than doing weight times sets times reps. So currently for myself, I am squatting every day, so 5 days a week, and on 2 days a week, which is a 6th day, I train 6 days a week, then I am deadlifting. One of those deadlift days is kind of at very sub-maximal weights, so probably not providing a very good training stimulus. However, I am learning to recruit whatever muscles that I'm growing through the squats into the deadlifts on the midweek session when I'm just practicing the movement itself. So that day, that Wednesday that I train at like 70% or 80% of my normal deadlift, I am pulling, to learn to recruit motor patterns or recruit muscle fibers for that movement rather than using the movement as a way to grow muscle. However, I'm obviously providing a stimulus when I go up to a heavier weight on my Saturday session when I deadlift as the primary movement. So in that day, I may do anything from 1 to 5, and I just usually build up to 1 heavy set on the deadlifts, and I don't really do any back off sets that day. But so for the squats though, I do 1 heavy set and I usually do 2 back off sets. And I do a variety of different kinds of squats. 2 days out of the week I do the high bar squat that I kind of prefer and that I like. 1 day out of the week currently I am practicing doing the typical powerlifting style squat where the bar's lower on your back, where your torso comes slightly more forward than the upright torso that's commonly seen amongst Olympic weightlifters when they squat, and I take a little bit wider stance. All things that are very different for me that I'm having to adjust to and learn for competitive, so that I can be more competitive in the sport of powerlifting. Don't necessarily think that's the most ideal way to train for muscle growth or for athletic performance, but since I am a competitive powerlifter, I want to do well in my sport, so it's necessary in that instance. And then I do a press every day, so and I do pull-ups or something every day. So a squat, a press, and a pull. I do those things every day. Every day I do some type of ab work, and that's about it. I don't really do a whole lot other than that. But over time, if I want to continue to see muscle growth, I will eventually need to start increasing the amount of back off sets that I do in that style of training, or I'll have to modify it in some other way. So that's just how I choose to do it. So if I'm looking at specifically squats though, that's 15 sets done over the course of a week. So 5 days a week that I squat, 3 sets on each of those days, so that's 15 sets. So say 2 years from now, a year or 2 from now, I'll probably have to have gone up to 20, 25 sets that I do if I want to continue to see progress. So that's just some of the research I linked in the description box below, and some of how I personally apply it to my own training. You guys take it easy, and I'll talk to you in the next video.